I will dare to do what I have to do to keep the people of Trinidad and Tobago safe. That is my priority. I've said TNT first. That is my priority. I have no intention, we've had no discussions of invading Venezuela, of stepping onto Venezuelan soil. Nothing of the sort is happening.
Okay, so last week, this time I covered this story coming out of Trinidad and Tobago with people shocked around the Caribbean seeing this footage coming out of Trinidad and Tobago about the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Prasad Possessor, in that video saying that she have no intention of invading Venezuela. And people, the reaction was swift. People were saying, what is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago smoking to be coming out with such statement that Trinidad and Tobago is not in any talks of invading Venezuela? People were very shocked about it. And last week I did the video and I was talking about I spent the day at the Trinidad Day celebration, and I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people from Trinidad and Tobago, and everybody that I spoke to were nervous about the climate in the Caribbean. And a lot of people that I spoke to were also saying that they wish that the Prime Minister would tone down the strong words coming out of Trinidad and Tobago. So in that video, I stated that, look, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago kept on saying that look, they are going to make Trinidad and Tobago available to America warships and plane if Venezuela was supposed to invade Guyana. And I stated that there's no news report out there, no credible news report out there in 2025 that Venezuela have any intention of invading Guyana. No, zero reports out there about that. So I kept saying, why do the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago keep mentioning that when there's no report out there that Venezuela have any intention of invading Guyana? And not even the president of Guyana is talking about this so much. Everything that is going on now with the American presence in the Caribbean Sea, from what we hear coming out of the office of the president of America, the Trump administration, saying that, look, this is a war on drugs. This is nothing to do with Venezuela, nothing to do with Trinidad and Tobago. And last week I said there's an Argyle Declaration that was signed between Guyana and Venezuela, and the mediator was the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonzalez. When things heated up last year between Venezuela and Guyana, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines stepped in and he had a meeting with both leaders from the different countries. So I was saying that, look, diplomacy is the way to go. Why does the Prime Minister keep coming out with these strong words? And this could lead to a retaliation from the Venezuelan government, and Trinidad and Tobago is not in a position to deal with anything coming out of Venezuela. So now we saw some report coming out of Venezuela now that President Maduro got wind of this message, and President Maduro is sending a strong message that if the United States of America was ever supposed to touch them in Venezuela, that Trinidad would be their first target. And I warned about this last week, and not even a week later, this is what is coming out of Venezuela.
Tensions are heating up between Trinidad and Tobago and its closest neighbor, Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro has launched an attack on Prime Minister Kamala Prasad Possessor over her support for a U.S. military presence in the Southern Caribbean. During a media conference call carried live on Telesur English's Facebook page earlier today, Maduro questioned the reason for Prasad Possessor's U.S. support.
Crazy. She went crazy because she was threatening that she was going to authorize attacks from Trinidad and Tobago against Venezuela. That's like declaring war against Venezuela. I'm certain that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are against this.
Maduro
We are neighboring
reflected
countries.
Maduro reflected on the shared history between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, noting that there was a time when both nations functioned as one community.
Sucre, Trinidad and Tobago has been a life of cooperation and brotherhood. It's only now when this lady comes in, there has never been a governor of Trinidad and Tobago to threaten a war against Venezuela. Who is behind this?
Okay, so let me stop it right there. And so last week, the video that I did last week covering this story also, I mentioned that Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela have a rich history going back to hundreds of years. Not just Trinidad and Venezuela, but Venezuela and the Caribbean, because the revolution started with Haiti and it went on to Venezuela, and Venezuela and Haiti was involved in a lot of revolution in terms of even Argentina and a lot of the Latin American countries. So Venezuela and the Caribbean, we have had a rich history. And I also mentioned that a lot of Caribbean, when slavery was abolished in the Caribbean, a lot of Caribbean nationals, Venezuela was the first place that a lot of Caribbean nationals went to seek employment, gainful employment in Venezuela. In that video, I mentioned that the first black millionaire in Jamaica went to Venezuela to become a millionaire and came back home to Jamaica. That is how he made his millions of dollars in Venezuela. A black Jamaican born from parents that were enslaved in Jamaica. After slavery was abolished, he went to Venezuela to make millions and return. We look at Guyana, we look at Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the list goes on. And there are a lot of Caribbean nationals that went to Venezuela over 100 years ago to get gainful employment. So I believe that the best way to deal with this was diplomacy. There's nothing. Just a few months ago, we were having a conversation about the Dragon deal between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. The American government was the one that stopped that deal. The American government was the one that threatened and say anyone purchase oil from Venezuela that they will face some heavy tariff. And just 2 weeks ago, we found out that the American government is still purchasing oil from Venezuela. So the hypocrisy. So I did not understand why the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago went out of her way to seek conflict with Venezuela when the Venezuela ambassador is still in Trinidad and Tobago. Venezuela was having good conversation with the government of Trinidad and Tobago just 9 months ago. So if the American president, under the leadership of the Trump administration, if the Trump administration is going in to Venezuela and saying that this is a war on drugs, which a lot of even American are saying that, look, we know what this is all about. This is not a war on drugs. This is about everything about this is about the oil. They want the oil in Venezuela. And a lot of Americans have came out recently to say that this is all about oil. I did a video a few months ago when an old clip of President Trump from his first administration said, look, we almost got them. We almost collapsed the nation of Venezuela, and I would go in and take the oil. That is what the president of America said, Donald Trump. His first administration, that is what he said. So I am so confused why the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago would put herself and the people of Trinidad and Tobago in risk of ruining a relationship with Venezuela that goes hundreds of years. Now we're seeing Venezuela saying that there's a possibility that they are willing to attack Trinidad and Tobago if the Trump administration was to ever do anything to escalate any conflict between America and Venezuela. And this is not a good place for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to be. So let's continue.
Who is imposing the intrigue? Who's whispering in the ears of this lady? How is she able to declare this? Who is behind all this? Marco Rubio, of course. The death lord and warlord, that's how he's being described. Wherever he goes, there are dead bombs, dead children, the lord of death and war.
has cautioned that it would retaliate if Trinidad and Tobago's territory were ever used as a base for U.S. military action against them.
Right, so that was President Maduro, and it is crazy because I was just talking about this not even 7 days ago, and this is just common sense. What I stated last week is that I don't believe that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago should have been coming out and talking so strong. I said last week, I believe that they need a press secretary to have, like, when they're coming out with statements, to have measured statements and not to be coming out with this form of aggression, because there's no way on God's earth that Trinidad and Tobago can go up against Venezuela. And this is just crazy that 1 week later, the same thing that I said last week, now we hear the president of Venezuela coming out and saying that he's willing to attack Trinidad and Tobago if provoked by America. So this is not good for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And one other thing that I also said, because the prime minister stating that, look, she's willing to give the Americans access to their land to attack Venezuela, and that is not necessary. I also pointed out last week that the Trump administration, they sent out fighter jet from America to Iran, which is over 3,000 miles, to blow up nuclear plants. So America would not need access of Trinidad and Tobago's land if they are going to do anything in Venezuela. If they can go to Iran, that is much further than Venezuela, they can launch an attack from America to Venezuela. So giving access to Trinidad and Tobago, that was not a good idea. That was not, those words should not have come out of the Prime Minister's mouth, because, as I stated also in the video last week, Trinidad and Tobago does not have a missile defense system. The only country in the world that America has given a missile defense system is like Israel. And America is not going to provide Trinidad and Tobago with any missile defense system. After the Trump administration is out of office, Trinidad and Tobago would be the one that have to deal with that relationship with Venezuela. So this was not a good idea. And it even got worse. Now we have another politician in Trinidad and Tobago running off his mouth and putting the people of Trinidad and Tobago at risk.
Trinidad is part of the Indian diaspora. Trinidad has more people of East Indian descent in it than any other race. Modi come here to show Trinidad and Tobago that one of the most powerful nations in the world have Trinidad in his hands. And he will nuke Venezuela.
Okay, so that was Philip Alexander, another politician from Trinidad and Tobago from the UNC party. And I have to say, this statement from this politician is the most reckless statement that I've ever heard from any politician in the Caribbean. Ever. I've never heard a statement this reckless. This statement is confirming what a lot of people are talking about in Trinidad and Tobago. A statement like that. And I believe that this politician, Philip Alexander, should not remain in office for coming out with such a statement. Because if you are not living in Trinidad and Tobago and you hear people in Trinidad and Tobago talking about the racial tension within the country, and now you have a politician coming out stating that, look, to hear a politician coming out of Trinidad and Tobago saying that because majority of the population of Trinidad and Tobago are Indo-Trinidadians, that the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, would nuke Venezuela. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. First, that is not possible. That is not possible. India is on the other side of the world. America, England, Canada would not allow India to send fighter jet or to attack Venezuela from the other side of the world. That is not possible. So this is reckless. And when people, as I said, when people talk about the racial tension, he is just confirming that he thinks because majority of the population is of Indo-Trinidadian descent, that somehow India has like ownership of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is just ridiculous. And we saw him coming out now and doubling down on this craziness, and I don't know how this guy is still in political office.
Do you have any information that India has any sort of arrangement with Trinidad and Tobago for that to take place?
I have no information on that. We have a Minister of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs, and he would be the best person to talk to. Our Prime Minister is very clear, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs said, CARICOM and Foreign Affairs said, we're not responding well to threats. And we know that that is based on the fact that Trinidad has a lot of friends in the world. All of a sudden, everybody wants to be Trinidad's friend since April 28th.
Given it's a sensitive diplomatic topic, if you don't have that information, why would you make such a strong statement like that using the word nuke?
Oh my gosh, it was a live video. And yes, in live videos, there would be hyperbole. But the reality of the situation is the President of the United States of America didn't just send 3 warships. He sent an Ohio-class submarine sitting somewhere at the bottom of the ocean in the Southern Caribbean. Trinidad is protected from all of the bluster and the threats that's coming from Venezuela. That is what I was trying to say.
You've been accused of making things worse now. Do you think so?
Did Venezuela call my name? Or is Amory Brown preoccupied with me? Because I find people like Amory Brown preoccupied with me, and I don't want that. I don't want his attention. I don't want them talking about me. What I say is on behalf of Philip Edward Alexander. I'm not crossing any lines with them. They should stay in their lane.
The PM spoke about staying in your lane. Is this staying in your lane?
I think I am going to stay more in my lane after this. Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, this is the most irresponsible thing I've ever seen from any politician. And as I said last week, someone need to take the mic away from these politicians. We have CARICOM for a reason. The Argyle Declaration is there for a reason. Let someone else deal with it. Let someone else talk, because every conversation, every time we have seen the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in front of a media, it gets worse. And now we see this politician now, Philip Alexander, making it even worse. And one thing I must say is that when we have these conversations, there's a lot of people from Trinidad and Tobago that will support anything that comes out of the Prime Minister's office. And yes, you have a right to support it. But what I've said also is that the consequences, I hope, like if anything, there's any repercussion based on the words that are coming out of this administration, that the people who are supporting all this nonsense don't try to pass it on as someone else, because this is self-inflicted. This is self-inflicted. Every single country around the world now that is talking about, from Mexico, Colombia, even in America, people are saying that, look, this thing about war and drugs with Venezuela, this is not real. Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the UNC government, is the only party that I've seen that is coming out 10 toes down supporting the Trump administration on this one. And as I said, the government can change. If the Republicans get voted out and the Democrats are in power, Trinidad and Tobago they're still next door neighbors of Venezuela. And if the relationship is fractured and Donald Trump is long gone, the people of Trinidad and Tobago are going to have to live with Venezuela as their neighbors for a long time. And a destabilized Venezuela, the neighbors of Trinidad and Tobago, and a fractured relationship is not what the people of Trinidad and Tobago deserve. So guys, sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this one. What do you think about the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and her statement? What do you think about Philip Alexander? And now, President Maduro coming out and saying that, look, if they are attacked by the US, that the first retaliation would be on Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, he didn't say Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago. Sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.